With our buddy Zach Abraham, Chief Investment Officer, Bulwark Capital, friend of the show, sponsor of the show. Let's just jump into this really quick. What'd you make of the scene in the White House?
Man, well, you and I texted about it off scene. I thought a lot of things about it. So first of all, I don't know if you're like this, but I'm increasingly getting the feeling that there is a lot of things going on behind the scenes that we are not aware of.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean on all sides, meaning this. And it could be as simple as just being fired up and being under the gun for a long time, and maybe he just lost his cool a little bit. But I find the tone at which Zelensky entered that meeting to be very odd.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you know who Trump is. The whole world knows who Trump is. You know it's contentious. You know you guys aren't in lockstep. But you also know, let's sit back and take a look at the Ukraine thing. I was thinking about this over the weekend a lot, too. Okay, like, we stand with Ukraine. Okay, so from everything that I've been able to glean from what that means is that we believe we should keep sending them an endless supply of weapons and money, right?
Apparently, that's what they think it is.
Right. Okay, well, here's the problem. Based on everything that I know and I've heard, that you're reaching quickly a point in Ukraine where equipment and money isn't going to matter because you're running out of people.
Yeah.
Okay? So what that really means, if we're being adults and take a step back and look at it, is you have one of two choices. Okay? If you're serious about quote-unquote standing with Ukraine, then the only way that they've got a snowball's chance in hell is if you're prepared to put European and U.S. soldiers on the ground. Okay? So let's have that conversation. Because if you're not willing to do that, how does it make any bloody sense to flush another $200 billion out? You know what I mean? Like, all that's going to end up in is more Ukrainians dead and less leverage at the negotiating table with Putin. So before you start just excoriating Trump as this what is he supposed to do? If you're not going to put troops on the ground, then what are we doing?
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
And I don't think anybody, I haven't even heard the most ardent Ukrainian defenders advocating for us putting troops on the ground.
No.
So I'm looking at this situation increasingly going, why would Zelensky come in with that type of heat and that type of attitude? I just, to me, it left more questions than answers. It's just odd.
My take has been he is obsessed with all of the trappings. He has read his own press. It was as much an intervention about, dude, we know you want to be Bono. We know you like all the trappings. You don't think the private jets, you want to go over to buddy. People cheer you on. You want to wear the black outfit when everybody's in black tie. You want all that. You like the stuff. You're kind of over this, but you don't want to give that up because you like being the rock star Churchill of modern times.
Yeah, I mean, it's not hard to see that angle. Right?
Yeah.
And then you talk to other people that are on the ground in Ukraine, and you get a completely different view and report of what their government is doing on the ground. I just, you know what, man? This increasingly reminds me of, the Israeli-Palestinian situation in the sense where there are a lot of hot takes, and I don't think that any of them embody or address a lot of the questions that I have, which is, what are the real motivations here, right? Like, meaning I listen to Zelensky and I watch his attitude and, the way he acts in the Oval Office. We all know the people, that are people and parties and special interests that are pushing this whole stand with Ukraine thing. And I don't want to be too conspiratorial, man, but I just feel like I'm looking around the world and I feel like at every level, it is like the system trying to make Trump and his administration look as bad as they possibly can. And I was having this conversation with a buddy of mine who's not a huge fan of Trump, but he's a common sense guy. He's a reasonable human being. And he's like, it feels like we're descending into chaos and it's, here it comes again. And I said, look, I understand why you have that read on this. But I said, here's the other thing that you've got to keep in mind. That if Trump was doing exactly what he claims to be doing, if Trump was going after the system and really trying to root this stuff out, what type of immune response would you expect to hear from those people in that system?
Yeah.
My suspicion is it would be very similar to what you're hearing now.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to delineate, and it's led me to believe that this whole, like, let's make a mountain out of a molehill. Let's make a huge deal out of everything Trump does. I honestly believe that that's a strategy being deployed by the other side to give people like Trump fatigue, right? Like kind of like they did in his first 4 years.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm hearing people talk, and I'm like, to a certain degree, I think it's working. I just think people need to, and look, I don't have the answer for this, but I think people need to ask themselves a question. How much of this is chaos being driven by Trump because he's a chaos agent? And how much of this is an immune response from the system that he's threatening? I don't have the attitude, I don't have the answer to that, but my suspicion is that a lot more of this is an immune response than it is an actual critique of what he's doing, his methods, or his.
The funny thing is, it's always about who he is. It's always about the things he says. It's never about, were those things right?
Right. No, that's never. Yeah. Well, because that's mean.
Yeah. And that's the whole
binary.
thing. It's mean. It's not, oh, yeah, but is he right about this? Well, he's totally right about it. Okay, well, that's all I need to know. I don't need to know the rest of the stuff. You don't like him anyways. He could solve cancer and you'd be mad at him.
Right. Oh, 100%. Yeah. And then at the same time, like you and I said, he does stuff that opens himself up, right? Like the Trump coin and the Melania coin. And you're like, hey, let's avoid all those, Yeah. But no, it's hard to tell. The other thing I feel like is that it does seem to me like I said, there's a lot more going on underneath the surface behind closed doors. When you see the people, like, they just go, for instance, and see where a lot of this USAID money went to, USAID.
Yeah.
Just look, of course there's going to be a lot of people around the world and a lot of politicians that were using that as a slush fund for their own, their own causes. Of course that's going to upset a lot of people. Go look how much money that is.
That's the time.
Right? And that's the thing that I wish people in this country would be like, hey, do you think this country's on the wrong path? Do you think things are going? Yes. Okay. So then somebody that's coming in and fixing that, you should expect it to sound and look like chaos, because the people involved don't have an interest, right? Like, they want to make it look like every single thing he's doing. You think cutting waste, they think smaller profit margins.
Yeah.
Right? You think less war, they think lower profits. Right? Like, you just so you know what you're up against, and you got to keep that in mind, because the system that we all think is corrupt and that's done us all dirty, when that system is crying out and saying stop, that may not be a bad thing.
Yeah, no doubt. Talking to Zach Abraham, Chief Investment Officer, Bulwark Capital. When you see what's going on with, like, Ukraine, like, how do you approach it from an investor side of things? Because obviously the markets love stability, but the markets will also find things they think that may benefit. Smart traders are going to look for stuff. But how do you guys, like, approach the potential for more unsettled times in the Middle East and right now with Ukraine?
Well, generally speaking, it really all depends on the environment where something like that occurs, right? But the first thought that goes through my mind, especially in this environment, is you need to think about extreme outcomes in one way or the other, because when you look around at the world today and you look around at markets, and the U.S. market being the number one example of this, asset markets are not priced in a way that reflects the amount of geopolitical risk out there in the world. So full stop, they're just not. And I think there are a lot of things that asset markets are not pricing in. So first and foremost, you look at a situation like this and you try to go, okay, what is it that I think has an actually decent chance of happening? And and if I find that thing, I want to find something that I think has a decent chance of happening, but that the market is pricing as if it has zero chance of happening, right? Because that's usually where opportunity lies. And I think a lot of that opportunity is present today. So for instance, the number one thing I think about is ironic as this sounds, that I think about with what's going on in Europe, is I think that this very well could be a wonderful investment opportunity in Europe. Okay, as crazy as that sounds. So bear with me. If you get a resolution of any kind to Ukraine and Russia, that is going to benefit Europe much more than it will North America.
Yeah.
Okay. You also have European countries starting to talk about fiscal stimulus, like Germany, who's, for fears of going back to the Weimar Republic and days of hyperinflation back in the 20s, they have been so hesitant to do, but they're sitting there at like 65% debt to GDP. Their economy's been in the tank for years. They are a perfect example of what could. So you start looking at Europe, you start looking at some of these international markets who have literally had the worst comparable performance to U.S. markets in history over this entire cycle. And you look at the valuation spread, and what you see is everything and the kitchen sink priced into U.S. markets. And you flip around and you look at it like the whole world thinks that every other market outside the U.S. is going to zero. So the number one thing I'm thinking about when I look at the world is I think that everybody is way overstaying their investment trip into the United States. And I think that because of what's going on, in my opinion, I think everybody else is looking at, not everybody, but I think most investors are looking at this thing exactly backwards. They see the potential risk and nastiness going on in Europe as it relates to Ukraine and Russia. I sit there and I see and this isn't just Europe, but international markets. I see markets that have been historically left behind by U.S. markets, and I see markets where they are priced for absolutely nothing going right. And if any single one positive thing plays out, there is just immense energy pent up in these international markets. And then what you're starting to look at too, which is really interesting, is flows, right? We've talked about passive flows and passive indexing and how important that's been in this entire cycle. Well, when you've got two things going on right now, which is, U.S. growth prospects in terms of what's going on economically, growth in the U.S. continues to slow. Okay, it just does. If people tell you it's not slowing, they're not looking at the data. Okay, at the same time, you have the dollar getting weaker because of what's going on. And at the same time, you've got all these trade war rumors and tariff rumors, okay? I cannot tell you to what magnitude that this impact will be, but when you add all of those things up, they could have a lot of implications. The one implication that I know that they have is it absolutely encourages people to repatriate money back to their home country.
Yep.
Okay? So increased, slowing growth in the United States, increased prospects of stimulus outside of the U.S., and then tariffs. All of those things encourage outflows into the U.S. And that's where it gets so interesting to us, Chad, because when you see you've never had U.S. markets more crowded or more expensive in relationship to the rest of the world. And when that trickle just starts, and to be fair, it's just a trickle right now, but when that money starts moving around to other markets in the world, it's going to make a huge impact because those markets have been just completely starved of capital. And that's what I think I look at the world. I think the world is assessing risk in a very poor way right now. And I think the thing that they're scared of should be the thing where they see opportunity. And I think where investors feel so sanguine and so happy and so content and so safe, I'm sitting there looking at Costco today getting bid up by 90 basis points, trading at 63 times earnings. And we got an Atlanta nowcast coming out of their GDP Now system at negative 2.5%, the lowest print we've had since COVID. So we are watching personal consumption going down, earnings estimates going down, and Costco going up, trading at 63 times earnings. So and look, there's a lot of other crazier stuff more expensive than Costco, but that's just a classic example to me of, hey guys, there are just a lot better opportunities out there in the world than bidding up Costco at its most expensive valuation in history going into an economic slowdown.
Crazy. His name's Zach Abraham, Chief Investment Officer, Bulwark Capital. People want to join you. We got the 20th this month, and they want to hang out with you, find out everything you do. What do they do?
Yeah, man, we got our virtual roadshow coming up where we're going to give you about a 45-minute presentation. It's going to walk you through who we are, how we do what we do. And, you're going to have a very good understanding of who we are, why we do the things we do, breaking down our investment philosophy, performance, all those kinds of things, with no obligation. So you're going to know after 45 minutes whether that's a conversation you want to have. And if it is, we'll set up a call with either one of my advisors or myself personally. But yeah, easiest way to do that, go to bulwarkcapitalmanagement.com, knowyourriskradio.com. Google us, not hard to find at all. And yeah, we got that free seminar coming up on the 20th. You shouldn't want to miss it.
Right on, brother. Good talking to you. We'll do it again next week.
All right, thanks for having me, man. Fun as always.
Investment advisory services offered through Trek Financial LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. The opinions expressed in this program are for general informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual or on any specific security. Any references to performance of securities are thought to be materially accurate, and actual performance may differ. Investments involve risk and are not guaranteed. Past performance doesn't guarantee future results. Trek 24308.